Hello guys, our next session is from Valentin Rudnitsky, who works as a gaming consultant at Google, having a rich experience of growing the user acquisition activities for top mobile gaming studios across Eastern and Southern Europe. And he's gonna tell us about growing with Google EC, the power, this shows the power of automation, modeling, and value optimization. Giving you the floor, Valentin.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I'm Valentin. Probably some of you know me already. I'm quite familiar with many of you in the gaming space. As just mentioned, today we're going to talk about Google App Campaigns and specifically about the power of automation in the campaigns and about why modeling is so important for us right now, why it will be even more important, and what are the big things to look at. So, quick agenda for today. So first we will recap something that most of you probably already know if you worked with Google App Campaigns, which is why automation is the way to go. Why do we believe that the automation is the only way we can see the user acquisition in the future? Then we move forward to some more applicable stuff, and we will be talking about tROAS a little bit, why we believe in the power of value-based bidding, and why we think that this is the ultimate state of things, especially for user acquisition in gaming. Then we will go a little bit into a new space, which is on the edge of privacy and measurement. And we will talk about modeling and how do we model the conversions in the privacy-centric world and what to expect in the future. And then suddenly after that, we will talk really briefly about what our product teams are looking ahead and what to expect from Google Ads in the near future in terms of the product development. So we will start with the basics. And again, as I said, I hope most of you know already the topic, but for those who don't, I just want to have a brief introduction. And I want to talk about why we are so obsessed with the automation. To start with, if there is one thing to know about app campaigns at Google, or some of you know it with the previous name as UEC, then the only single most important thing about UEC is that it is fully automated. So we do not have any sort of manual targeting. We do not have control over networks. We don't have control over what creatives do we serve. The approach that we have is that we have the manual intervention as a minimum, and we just give all the assets to the system and let it optimize. Many of you are asking privately or publicly of whether this approach will go away at some point. The answer is no, and likely we will see more and more automation coming on the way. And we really want to talk over why this is the case. So broadly, why do we believe in automation? If you live in the world of 5 years ago, usually the things that we would be operating with is what is our target audience? Like what is the age, what is the gender, what is the device type, or the interest, and you would target specific audiences based on some assumptions. But if you think about it, this is an oversimplification because in reality, people are not comprised of 4, 5, 6 characteristics. There are actually many micro signals that may suggest who is the right audience, who is not the right audience, is it the right moment to reach to the person or not the right moment to reach to the person. And just by definition, we as humans cannot control all that factors. This is why we believe that the future of user acquisition is only automation and only given the chance to the system to decide who is your best lead and who is the most efficient player of your game or the user of your app. This is the broad concept of why we believe in automation. But then let's go a little bit deeper and just illustrate as an example. So imagine that on the screen, every blue dot that you see is a user, and this cloud of dots is the universe of all the users that you have theoretically. So some of them may be profitable, some of them are not. So let's assume that any user that is above the red line is profitable user, any user below the red line is non-profitable. Now let's assume that we live in the world of the past, which is where we say that we want to target someone, I don't know, 25, 35, interested in hardcore games, and those are the only people that we want to acquire. Those users may or may not be the profitable users. So as you see on this bubble, some of them are below the profitability line, some of them are above the profitability line. What it shows is that if we go with the manual targeting, we can be accurate at some point and not accurate at some other point. Instead, What we want to do, we want to tell the system to bring us the users whose profitability potential is maximized regardless of whether they are our target audience or not. So this thing can only be resolved by the machine learning. I hope this is clear. Some of you may say that that's the theory. In practice, we know our audience very well, so we do need the manual control. Okay, let's see what would happen if we only had the manual control. So here you see the case of the manual targeting, and on the y-axis you see the precision of our learning, and on the x-axis you see the days that passed after you started user acquisition. So if you know your audience, then probably you will be very efficient from the day one. So just because I know that the person X will like my game, that means by definition that the precision of our of acquiring the same user is right. But the problem is that this audience will be limited. So over time, if you look at the scale of your user acquisition activities, you will see that for some period you will be running good user acquisition campaigns, but then afterwards the scale will drop. And this is something that you see on many networks where you acquire your traffic, that you launch a campaign, it works well for a couple of days, and then you have to stop it, kill it, and restart. So this is the thing that we want to solve for. With automation, yes, we know there is a pain point that the automated campaigns have to learn, and the precision and the ROI of your user acquisition activity can be volatile, but it learns. And for the long term, we can disregard the learning stage, because the learning stage is a couple of days and the campaign operation is a couple of months. In return, what we're getting is stable traffic that can work for month and month within one campaign, within one setup, and you do not need any intervention. So this is a rough understanding of why we're moving away from any sort of manual control and we're giving it to the system. Now, with all that in mind, our operational mindset should change as well towards the automation. We want to move away from micromanagement. So what is becoming less and less relevant for us is enforcement of the audiences, enforcement of specific ads, doing the A/B tests. And this is, by the way, an important thing. So with the automated world, we do not have A/B tests anymore, because there is no such a thing as a good creative or a bad creative. There is a thing whether the next creative is bringing incremental audiences. And this is what we need to think of. So we're moving away from the micromanagement, and we're going to something more holistic. So we want to see if we're giving the system the right goal, if we're telling to bring the right result, if we're accurate about measuring our targets, and if we're looking into the incrementality of our activity rather than comparing A versus B. I hope this is clear. And now we are moving to the next section of our talk today, which is why do we believe that the value-based optimization, meaning tROAS, is the only way to focus on the profitability. So let's remind us what can be the campaign goals. Probably this is more relevant for app campaigns in Google, but broadly speaking, this is relevant to any network. So you may have one of the three goals. Goal number one is that you want to acquire as many players as possible in your game. For that goal, you have the campaign, which is optimizing towards cost per install. This is a no-brainer. Now, you can also have the goal of engaging as many engaged users, for example, players who would complete a certain level in your game. For that, you have CPA campaigns. And then finally, you may have a goal of, I don't care how the users play. They may play very badly or very deeply, but I need them to be profitable. So I'm fine getting a user for 1 cent who will press 2 buttons, as well as I'm fine getting a user for $10 who will play a lot, because all of them are profitable. So for that, you have a tROAS target. This is obvious for most of people, but what is not obvious is that these strategies are mutually exclusive, oftentimes. So the CPI campaign will focus on bringing you cheap installs, but it will not care about how good the quality of the user is. The CPA campaign will not care about the cost per install as well as about the profit. It will only care about whether the users are achieving a certain progress in the game. And lastly, the tROAS campaign will disregard most of the things except for the revenue divided by cost. And this is why it is important to know specifically what is your goal. And if you are saying that we want to profit, you should only do tROAS. If you say we want just many cheap installs, we don't care about quality, do the CPI campaign. For gaming, historically, it is the ROAS. So this is in the 99% of cases, ROAS is the only optimization strategy that you want to focus on. To illustrate a little bit, let's assume that you have 3 purchasers in the world, three buyers. Buyer number 1 costs you $100 to acquire in a CPI terms. Buyer 2 costs you $200 to acquire, and the buyer 3 costs you $300 to acquire. So if you were running the CPI campaign, the CPI campaign would tell you for sure we buy the blue guy here and we disregard the orange and the red. But let's look how do they purchase. Some of them purchased less, some of them purchased more. And of those who purchase more, some of them paying, let's say, $20 average value of the purchase, and some pay more. And if you translate that into the CPA terms, so the CPA campaign, it would disregard the value of the purchases. It will be only looking at basically your CPI divided by the number of purchases. So in the first case, the CPA would be $100. In the second case, also $100. In the third case, $150. But if you look at the ROAS campaign, the ROAS campaign would be looking not at the number of purchases, it will be looking at the value of purchases. And suddenly you will realize that the buyers number 2 and number 3 bring you 20% ROAS, and the first guy brings 10%. This is complex, but why I'm showing that? The tROAS campaign will always focus on the last 2 guys, those who bring the biggest profitability. The CPA campaign, even if the goal is purchases as well, will focus on the first 2 guys, those for whom the CPA is the lowest. So what you have 2 things. The first inefficiency comes from the fact that you are not, if you use the CPA campaign, so the first inefficiency comes from the fact that you are not acquiring the really profitable user. So you disregard the user number 3 simply because the CPA is high, even though this is a profitable user. And the second inefficiency is that you're investing in users who you actually don't want to get, those like the blue guys here, because they are cheap, supposedly, while they are not. So what I'm trying to say is that with the CPA campaigns, you will need to do tricks and tweaks in order to fine-tune it for your real goal, which is ROAS. So why doing the CPA if you can do ROAS straight away? And the common feedback that we hear from the advertisers about this is that we only care about ROAS, nothing else, but we want to keep eggs in different baskets. We want to diversify. And this is why we want to run 2 campaigns in parallel. We will do a little bit of a CPA and we will do a little bit of ROAS. So let me explain you why this is not a good idea. So let's say you have one CPA campaign which optimizes for purchases. And let's say it has a bid of $100 per purchase. This campaign will reach out to a certain audience of users. Let's say this is this round, the orange circle. And then you have another campaign that runs in parallel, which is a tROAS campaign. Same event, but instead of a $100 bid, you have a 20% bid. Let's assume they're more or less similar. This campaign will also reach out to a certain audience, but the problem is that the audiences will overlap, because in the end of the day, both campaigns will try to target purchasers. What happens when there is an overlap? Google Ads has a problem. It doesn't know which campaign to choose to send to an auction and compete for the user. So it has to select one of them. So let's say there is an auction right now. I'm taking my phone, I'm playing a game, and I'm about to see an ad. And Google Ads needs to decide, do I need to see the ad from a CPA campaign or from a ROAS campaign? Now, the trick is, it will not decide, it will likely not send an impression to the best campaign. It will send an impression to the campaign that it is more confident about. And usually, the more confident campaign is the campaign that has more history, which tends to be the CPA campaign, because many of you are doing it already. And this is an inefficiency. So it might seem that the tROAS even works worse, but it's working worse not because it's worse. It's working worse because it's not led to the best auctions, which are kind of stolen by the old CPA campaign. And we have a chicken and egg problem here. On the one hand, you are not getting the optimal efficiency. On the other hand, you cannot get it before you start focusing solely and only on the tROAS campaign. So the takeaway here is that know your goal, and if your goal is ROAS, do the ROAS campaign alone. Just to illustrate, in the EMEA business and among the big EMEA studios, like I was taking an example of top 50 EMEA gaming studios, most of them, like 70%, are using tROAS as their primary strategy, and 20% of, so every fifth gaming studio among the top 50 in EMEA is almost exclusively investing money into the ROAS, and this number is going up and up. So this is like a proof for you that the tROAS is a working strategy for gaming. Okay, and you may ask, so we're fine with that. We are fully on board with tROAS. What's next? So right now, you're probably sending over the purchasers, the purchases that are happening post-acquisition. So let's say you bought an install and you're tracking this install for a number of days and see how many users are coming and how many of them are paying and what amount. And we optimize your campaigns towards that. But the problem is that we use the conversion window to cut off the tracking period. So for example, if your conversion window is 7 days, which is most likely the case, then we only track the buyer for 7 days and make an assumption who pays more within 7 days, that user is better. But what if there are two guys, one of them is reaching 20% ROI by day 7, another is reaching, I don't know, 15%, and day 7 is over. And then I want less of these guys and more of these guys because these perform better. But what if you know that after day 7, the picture looks like this? The users start to diverge. And because we stop tracking in day 7, we only get a partial picture, which is actually wrong. So how to resolve for this? The answer is pLTV, which is projected LTV, or which is your estimate, which is your projected lifetime value. If you have a model inside your company that looks at the user for the first couple of days and is able to send us the ping back that, okay, user 1 will earn X amount of dollars over the lifetime, you could send that value instead of the value of each factual purchase, and we could optimize the tROAS campaign towards that. And if you see this picture in your specific game, if the users indeed look like that, meaning the short-term behavior does not correlate with the long-term behavior, the pLTV is the way to go for you and the way to look at. So just to give you an illustration how differently we would perform. So if right now you're sending us the transaction values, and let's say this is the overall lifetime of the user, so you're sending something on day 3, on day 5, day 7, then we cut off. And then how do we define the target? We know that LTV is, let's say, $175 in this example, and we know that we want to make plus 30% of revenue. And then we know that day 7 is 25 only, so we divide by one another, and then we say we want our campaign to optimize towards a 20% target. But this figure comes with a delay, and this is still a proxy. In the pLTV world, what we're saying is that we know that the LTV of the user is the same, $175, but we send it immediately, like on the day 2 or 3, and we're setting the ROAS that we want to achieve. So in the campaign setting, you would set not 20%, but 140%, because this is what you want to achieve over time. But the main difference is that you pass the whole value of the user rather than part of it. It will be fast and precise. Last but not least, this is true not only for in-app purchases, it's also true for the ad revenue. And by the way, we're opening the beta product on the tROAS on ad revenue if you're not using it yet. And if you have contacts in Google, reach out. We will help you do that. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about the automation in modeling in the value-based bidding. So basically, long story short, when the iOS 14.5 started, we woke up in the world where we cannot track data anymore, or we cannot track all the data, and we need to figure out something with this. So we cannot say that here's my 100 users, here is the $1,000 they paid, and here is what I want to optimize. Instead, we only know the data about 20 users on the user level, and then maybe scan whatever. But we need to figure out what is the audience, who is paying how, and how do we optimize the campaign. So this was the start. In addition to that, we had many guidelines from different governments and so on and so forth. So the idea is that the environment is really toughening. And we needed to do something with that. And actually, Apple's policy is not the only thing in the world. We are also following up with our privacy initiatives as well as Android. However, it will sound differently and it will look differently. So from our perspective as an Android, we will be rolling out gradual improvements over time, not immediately, nothing for you to be worried about. And you can read more on our developers website and you will learn more about what steps we're making. But basically, our approach is that, yes, we will be following up with the industry on making user tracking safe. But at the same time, we're in a constant touch with all of you and we're getting the feedback, accepting the feedback, and designing our model in a way that we do not make advertisers lose money. So we are building the system that will be coherent and will satisfy everyone. So the timeline is that right now we're experimenting with a couple of things which we can follow up separately and which you can see on the website of developersgoogle.com, and you can learn more about Android Privacy Sandbox. We're testing stuff throughout 2022 and we're iterating with that. In the end of 2023, we will only start rolling this out to the whole world, and this is where you will see any impact. So for now, for the ad space, you do not have to do anything. You should not worry about us following up with the same as Apple did. But something is coming up in the future, so stay tuned and track our official announcements. Regardless of that, what I wanted to point out is that if before we had a world where we relied on the tracked data, right now, both in iOS and in the future in Android, we will be relying on modeling more and more. Why modeling? Because let's say as an ad network, we could choose one of the couple of options of how to proceed with this uncertainty. The one thing would be to do the fingerprinting, but we do not believe this is the right thing to do, so we're not doing that. Another thing would be to rely on something that people from outside provide us. For example, scan data. Good option, we can use it as a proxy, but unfortunately, this is something that we do not want to rely on, because what if scan changes tomorrow? We need to have our own solution. The third option is to rely on your first-party data, which we'll talk over in a minute. This is a good way, but you will not have all the information. And the fourth thing is to combine all that together and use first-party data, scan, our learning, trackable data, to use all that and model it into the modeled conversion action. How do we do the modeling? We basically do a very simple thing. We collect all the observable data like device types, conversion types, countries, time of the day, and user behavior. Then take all of them and separate the tracked conversions versus not tracked conversions and try to link the observed linkage between the ad impression and the conversion. So this is the left part of this chart. So we know that some ad click led to a certain conversion. For some users, we don't know that, and we keep them aside. Now what we're doing, we're looking at the tracked conversions and we are grouping them into different buckets depending on some common characteristics. And then what we're saying then, that if we know that there are certain segments that we know how they behave, we try to match that patterns with unobservable conversion and unobserved conversion linkage. And finally, we extrapolate. So let's say we know that there was a group of clicks that led to 10% conversion rate, and we know there was another group of clicks which we do not know the conversion rate, so we apply the 10% conversion rate and model. So simple modeling, simple verification techniques like holdback validation, where we take a piece of traffic and try to model and predict it and see how it works together. And this is how we do the modeling. But what you need to know is that the keyword here is what is the source. So for the source, let me repeat, it's our data. It's the data that we extrapolate, the data that we can get from scan, but it's also the first-party data. And if you are doing the iOS campaigns, it is hugely important right now to take action and start collecting some first-party data through our Firebase-enabled solution called on-device measurement, which is where you can collect the email addresses of your users in a privacy-centric way, send them to the user device and do the matching, on-device matching of the email with an ad click, and then send that signal to us, anonymized, so the data never leaves the phone of the user, but we can use it to optimize our campaigns and get the for the robust and precise data about your conversions. So one takeaway from here: start collecting the first-party data, integrating with us, sending it to us, and the campaign will be optimized that way. Finally, quick slide about big steps we're thinking of as a Google product development. So we're looking at 3 streams. One stream is we're looking how to make Google app campaigns even more efficient. So we're looking at things like cold start. How do we do the situation when your campaigns start faster and more efficiently? A lot of that is based on Firebase, and a lot of that you will never see as a feature. All you need to do is to adopt Firebase, and then whenever we are ready with a product ramp up and the solution ramp up, this will be automatically applied to your app campaigns. But this will really depend on whether you have Firebase or not. The second thing is modeling and privacy. So we're looking how to look at scan integration. We're looking to see how can we do the enhanced reporting. We're seeing how can we incorporate on-device measurement. So the stream here is that to enable the better prediction, to enable the tROAS for iOS campaigns. This is still in the air a little bit, but this is developing. And then the third thing is that we're looking at is what are the different business cases that we can optimize for. So for now, the most straightforward case is if you're an in-app monetized game, and then we will support your in-app revenue with modeling of the quantity and quality. But we're also looking at how do we track ad revenue and use tROAS for ad revenue, and the same for hybrid monetization when you have both streams. So that's all from me. I think we have some time today for questions. If there are any, please let me know, and I hope this will be fun.
Yes, Valentin, thanks a lot for the presentation. It was really nice. And now we're moving to the question. So question number 1, is there any correlation between game model, I'm thinking about free-to-play or buy-to-play, and the model that you should choose for this game?
So if you're talking about the model that you should choose from the Google Ads standpoint, again, it does not really depend on the game genre. It does not depend on the game monetization model. It can be ad monetized, it can be free-to-play, it can be buy-to-play. The point is that if you care about profit, you should always choose tROAS campaign. If you care about DAU only, which can be the case, it's just rare, then you do the CPI. If you care about profit, but also you care about the number of payers, then you do the CPA campaign. In which case you will sacrifice on profitability a little bit, but you will ensure that you have enough payers. So it really depends not on the type of the game, it depends on what do you want to get from that game. If that makes sense.
Yes, thanks for your answer. So the next question, is there possibilities for the future upgrades and evolution maybe of this model, or just enhancing a precision for choosing people who will be advertised?
Okay, I get the question. So this is basically something that is changing, that is happening under the hood. So this is a piece that we are not talking much about, but actually our engineers are working every day to make that precision better. Just to give you a sense of it, for example, before it would take quite a long time for the campaign to test something, get a feedback, and relearn. Now it's happening in a shorter and shorter period of time. So the model under the hood is improving, and we're using Firebase, by the way, is a very important aspect here. So we use Firebase proprietary signals to fine-tune our models, to use automated similar audiences that we have on the backend, to kind of be more precise in the audience that we acquire. The big important thing here is that we're likely not going to provide you a solution to select the audience, but what we are doing is that we're fine-tuning our algorithms so that they are more precise in measuring the result, in self-calibrating, and essentially bringing the performance that you've set as a target. Last thing that I want to mention here, for Google App Campaigns, the goal is your event and your bid. So whenever you are not satisfied with the performance, you need to work on your bid, on your event. Maybe you need to change the optimization event. Maybe you need to change your bid. But this is the answer to most of the questions that relate to targeting, to be honest.
Thanks a lot for the answers. There we will end our session day. Thanks a lot, Valentin, again. If you have any questions, you can write Valentin in the direct messages.
Yeah. Thank you. It was nice chatting to you, and have a nice day.